I'll start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Dharawal people on whose land I'm meeting with you. And pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to, given the COVID times that we're in, put forward a mental health acknowledgement, which came from Australian first responders, and acknowledge and show my respects to the people in the group who have a lived experience and know your voice is valued and important to our community and the world that we live in. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alex Spillett, who is going to give us a COVID Illawarra jobs impact briefing. Alex Spillett is the policy manager for RDA Illawarra, and he is the wise one amongst the RDA Illawarra team and loves crunching data. So over to you, Alex, to give the presentation.
All right, thanks, Deborah. I hope everybody can hear me. Good morning. Welcome to the continuation of RDA Illawarra's regular commentary on the impact of COVID on jobs and recovery, not only nationwide, New South Wales wide, but also specific to the Illawarra. This will be a monthly update that we're going to continue for a little while via the web. The employment data that you're going to be looking at is extracted from Australian Bureau of Statistics data sets. And they have been using for some time ATO payroll data to compile many of the statistics that are going to be presented here. So they give a really good indication of payroll jobs and the impact that COVID is having. Other charts include data from sources that are available less frequently than the fortnightly updates from the ABS. And so also important to note that the datum point for the jobs that we're looking at is March last year. So bear that in mind when you're looking at the numbers. Although the data regarding payroll is up to date to the 31st of July. So let's move on. Let's have a look at the impact on unemployment in the Illawarra. This chart shows the impact by industry sector for the Illawarra since March 2020. It's based on the latest available payroll data as of 31st of July, as I said. We estimate that as of the end of July, there were 10,500 or 10,400 fewer people in work than at March 2020, where there were an estimated employment level of 140,000, both part-time and full-time roles. The RDA calculates based on those numbers that the unemployment rate in the Illawarra is about 12.4%. The major sectors that are affected, as you can see from the red bars: accommodation, food, the hospitality sector, again, arts and recreation, construction, education, training, and manufacturing. To give you an idea of the overall trend, not industry specific, but the employment recovery trend for the Illawarra from March through to 31st of July, this shows the payroll jobs index for the Illawarra from the start of the pandemic, when the data became available from the ATO via the APS. You can see in the first lockdown there was an almost immediate impact on jobs, and it bottomed out at a lot of 13,200 jobs for the region. Since then, there's been a recovery, a turnaround in that, and the recovery during the latter part of last year was quite dramatic and led to employment levels that were actually above pre-COVID levels. We had a dip over Christmas. There was another lockdown scare. Also, we had a lot of casual roles being let go prior to Christmas. But the recovery into the new year was very strong and maintained through to the start of the latest lockdown for Greater Sydney, Wollongong, and now the majority of the state. And you can see the rapid decline since the start of the latest lockdown to a reduction of 10,400 jobs. We're not yet at the same level of job losses as April 2020, but we are, as you can see, getting horrifyingly close. The latest ABS data allows us to have a look at a little more granular version. They're looking at SA4 regions. Unfortunately, these don't correlate quite to local government areas, but you can see we're looking at lines for Dapto and Port Kembla, Kiama, Shellharbour, and Wollongong. It's fair to say that each of the areas is struggling equally, although the Kiama Shellharbour area has done a little better than other regions or sub-regions during the course of the pandemic. Looking a little more in detail at the job losses, this gives a different depiction of our first chart. And really this waterfall shows where jobs have been shed and where they've been added. Unsurprisingly, the areas of healthcare, public administration continue to add jobs as they have done over the last 8 months. And most other areas are contracting. Again, the accommodation, food, construction, retail, manufacturing sectors are all impacted. Whoop, one too far. There we go. This chart was up to date to the start of June this year, and there's another one that I'll show you in a minute, which is up to date to the end of July. So this chart shows the status of each industry segment since March 2020. And it considers whether the sector is growing or contracting, which is the vertical axis, and how far away it is from pre-COVID employment levels, which is the horizontal axis. So to be growing and above pre-COVID employment levels, industries want to be in the top right quadrant. That's where the big green bubble is, that says above pre-COVID levels and growing. Those in the bottom left quadrant are struggling. They're not only below pre-COVID levels of employment, but they are also contracting. The other two segments, you can go either way. As you can see from this one, at the start of June, the situation looked reasonably positive. Most of the businesses were close to pre-COVID employment levels and adding people. Even accommodation and food services, which have been very badly affected, was continuing to add people at a very fast rate, closer and closer to pre-COVID levels of employment. Since then, unfortunately, we have seen a quite rapid change in that. And we see some major industries now shedding payroll jobs and moving further and further away from their pre-COVID level of employment. The healthcare and social assistance, public administration and safety remain in the positive quadrant, but other industries such as construction and accommodation and food, you can see in the bottom half of that bottom left-hand quadrant, struggling significantly. Positive thing for accommodation and food is that it was the hardest hit in our previous lockdown and has been the fastest recovery. Let's now look a little bit about the impact of COVID on age, gender and business size. So this data is for Australia-wide and looks at the payroll jobs index by age group, age cohort. It's important to note that this is based on an index. So it was indexed to 100 at the start of March 2020. And this is really the latest depiction data at the 31st of July. Younger males have seen the largest reduction in payroll jobs, and older workers continue to fare slightly better. Those people still establishing their careers, so aged sort of 20 to 34, and with younger families, are also quite heavily. Interestingly, the trend for older workers adding or maintaining their employment in the workforce, a trend that's continued from the previous data sets, and is quite an interesting trend. Moving on to look at the jobs impact by gender for New South Wales, and again, this is data up to the 31st of July. Shows that women are faring slightly better than their male counterparts in terms of payroll job losses, about 4% better than men overall. Prior to the current lockdown, that balance favoured women by about 40%. So women, since about October last year, were outstripping males in terms of returning workforce and taking up payroll jobs, and has reversed. Although women are doing slightly better now, the impact of this latest lockdown would appear to have been greater for women than it is for men. Moving now to the impact on employment by business size. Again, this index was 100 at March 2020, and this data is from the 31st of July data set, and shows the impact on payroll jobs for businesses with 0 to 19 employees, so the sole traders and micro businesses, small to medium businesses, 20 to 199 employees, and larger employers with 200 plus. And the smaller businesses and sole traders have been affected quite dramatically, although businesses of all sizes are clearly being impacted by the latest lockdown and the impact on their employment. Although that data is for New South Wales, you can see that comparing the Illawarra and New South Wales, we are a microcosm in many ways of New South Wales in terms of our business sizes. Although the Illawarra has a slightly higher percentage of small to medium businesses, overall, both New South Wales and the Illawarra have about 97% of businesses which are between 1 and 20 employees. So there's no reason to believe the same trend we saw in New South Wales is going to be repeated in the Illawarra. Well, the unfortunate thing is that for the Illawarra, our region has a higher proportion of businesses or micro businesses with 1 to 19 employees, have more businesses in badly affected sectors, including hospitality, the arts, construction, retail and manufacturing, than the New South Wales average. So potentially we are going to be worse affected than that New South Wales picture, especially with smaller businesses. And finally, moving on to our commuting habits. What we see here is the latest available data for rail and road commuting. And we can see that whilst rail commuting never really recovered following the initial lockdown in April last year, despite employment levels exceeding pre-COVID levels, rail commuting remained at about 50% below where it was pre-COVID. Maybe the conclusion from that is that more people are choosing to work from home rather than commute where they could. Interestingly, we didn't see the same reduction in road commuting. That recovered fairly quickly to about 2 or 3% below the level pre-COVID. Now has dived down quite significantly below the dip that we saw in the first lockdown. And that is the same trend for rail commuting. So there's no doubt the lockdown is having an impact on our moving around. So that's the end of the presentation formal part. It's not a good outlook for the Illawarra, but the light at the end of the tunnel is really the speed and the strength of the bounce back that we had post the previous lockdown. So we can look forward to that as soon as we are given a level of freedom. Thanks, Deborah.